Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I'm Randy Gooden. I'm the President of the Economic Development Commission. I'd like to call today's meeting to order. If you would, please mute out your mics for just a moment and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and we will get everything started. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Stevie, could I have a roll call, please?
Yep. Do I have Mr. Gooden here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And Mr. Jerry Spindler?
Present.
Okay. Mr. John Merrill?
Present.
Miss Laura Jacquin? No, okay. And Mr. Greg Hill?
I'm here.
Thanks.
Okay, we do have a quorum, so thank you. This is a special meeting of the EDC today, so we have some new business on the agenda. And at this time, I would like to, is it Adam that's speaking on behalf of this?
Chuck and I are both here today, as well as there's a few advisors and city staff on as well.
Okay, Stevie, do you mind reading the resolution lines, and then we will turn it over to Adam and team for presentation, please? Just read, yes, just read resolution.
Oh, okay. So it's the resolution number 2101, a resolution of the Greenwood Economic Development Commission making certain findings relating to the financing of certain economic development facilities, approving such financing and forms of the document related thereto.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing, and again, I'm going to turn the podium over to Adam and his team to give their presentation. Please hold questions till after they're done. Adam?
Thank you, President and members of the commission. This is Chuck Soggin. I'm a real estate development representative for the city, working with Adam and the mayor's team on this. One of the things we might do very briefly here is have the mayor, if he's still with us and hasn't been lost in the technology, give a quick overview of what he would like to see here, and then I can get around to providing introductions on the rest of our group.
Thank you, Chuck. Counselors, I just want to thank you for taking the time out today. As you can see in this first picture that Chuck's got up, we've been working for a couple of years now on the downtown development and redeveloping downtown. Since we came into office in 2012, we redid this building that we're currently in, which sparked growth in Old Town, and we were able to do the facade enhancements on a lot of the Old Town buildings, which has spurred a lot more growth. And then we were offered the opportunity to purchase the middle school property with the intent of fully developing it out into multi-use living for our downtown area and totally revitalizing the face of downtown. This is probably the most exciting project that will happen under my tenure, and I still plan on sticking around for a while. But this is incredibly exciting. I'm very proud of the team that we've been able to put together. You know, I want to personally thank Chuck and Kevin and Adam and Sam and Greg Wright and the many other people who've been involved in getting this together, along with Chris Wright and the Great Lakes Capital Group. This is an amazing project that is going to change the face of downtown and really bring a lot of good, healthy living in restaurant areas into our downtown area. And so with that, I want to thank you for the time today, and then I'll turn it back over to Chuck.
Thank you, Mayor. With us today also, you may see on the screen, but Sam Hodson and Zach Klutz from Taft Law are here. Jennifer Hudson with London Witty, who is an economic consultant for us. And from the developer team, there are three folks, David Arnold, Clay Sheets, and Chris Reed are all here, and I will introduce them as we move into the presentation. We were able to forward to you the overall presentation earlier, and hopefully you had a chance to look through that. As a result, I think we're going to move a little more quickly than we normally would, and not spend quite as much time as we did to others that were seeing this for the very first time. But what this will consist of is a quick sort of project overview, a discussion about our developer selection process. The developer is going to go over their bios and experience and the concept images with our project that's been selected, go through a preliminary construction timeline, and then turn it over to Adam to talk about the project agreement and the summary on that. And then we'll end with some conclusions and recommendations. And at the end, Zach Klutz will be speaking with you about the specific agenda item and our request for a vote this afternoon by the commission. So following this, the first slide is this project overview. The mayor mentioned the size of the project and the impact, and we're looking at something that we believe is going to total about $83.5 million between the private investment and the public side of this. There has been planning in one form or the other since about 2013 on this. At the end of the day, the estimated annual tax revenue is about $1 million. And our best estimate for how part of that will break out is about 200,000 of that will actually be on the base real estate assessment that will go to all of the various entities. There will be about $20 million collected over time. And the taxes that are coming off of this, basically due to the TIF area, are going to be used in several fashions that Adam will explain help finance the project. The developer investment is a very large one, about $68 million between debt and equity required on this. We believe that based on the studies that have been done and Adam's specific work on this, that there will be a nominal impact to the existing taxpayers that are in Greenwood. And this will continue to improve the nearby property values. All of you who own property, residential property in Greenwood, know what's been going on in the last 3 years approximately, all of which is good news. And we hope to continue that. We also want to make sure everybody understands that this really does not have any impact on the general fund as far as the budgetary impact there. And that the overall project, as we look at this and as the developers have come up with their plans, it's about a 2.5-year construction period to bring all of this online. So to look at the developer selection process, I know that we didn't spend a lot of time other than this, the slide. We want to talk about very quickly what had happened before the master plan implementation that we worked on prior to going out to a request for proposal for developers had a recommendation to the mayor and to the redevelopment commission to do a significant reinvestment in the downtown area. We thought this would be a much better message sent to the developers that the city was fully committed for the capital resources to do public realm improvements. And all of these that you see on this map and that you're familiar with, and you've either been to the park or have driven on Serena, all of those things that are listed on here were investments that were already made by the city prior to the time that the decision was made to go out on the search for a developer for the property that was there. Perhaps the largest of the investments is the field house that is sort of the centerpiece for that block. And that is a renovated gymnasium that was built in 1995 and we thought worthy of retaining on the site. The city is investing about $8 million with the Parks Department to provide another fitness venue, primarily for seniors and for kids, but there's a lot of things for everybody to do in that facility. So the next slide that we're going to is that developer selection process, as was suggested in 2013, was actually when the central TIF was created that allowed capital dollars to be able to come to this area and allow us to use for that. In 2016, Rundell Ernstberger, known as REA on this, did a master plan, and that became the focus of the investment strategy that we had. The middle school was actually acquired in 2017 for about $1 million. And in the next year and a half, demolition of the old school and stabilization that cost about $1,600,000. In 2019, site planning was done specifically for the properties that we wanted to offer in the developer package. And in 2019 and 20, we actually released the request for information, and the developer submission was actually done in January of that year. Following that, we had 5 submissions that were made, some of which were local developers, others were regional developers. Greg Allen submitted, the Scannell Group submitted, Envoy, Flaherty and Collins, all of which are sort of name brands around this area. And this team that you're going to hear from today that included Great Lakes Capital Corporation, based both in Fort Wayne and Indianapolis, and CRG Residential, that is also an Indianapolis-based company, but with offices throughout the Midwest. So during the time period from March to May, we got those interviews completed. We began to focus specifically with the input of 2 outside persons that were invited to participate. One is Kevin Hoover, who is on the Redevelopment Commission and the Board of Public Works, who he and Ezra Hill, who's the counselor for this district, attended each and every meeting that we had and presentation that was involved in providing input on the selection process, where we came back and recommended that the two groups in a partnership be selected for not only doing an individual property, which the developers could have submitted, but the entire parcel that we had to offer, which we thought was actually the best situation, more synergies, more opportunities to get the sort of density we wanted to be able to select one team to do the entire parcel. So what's in front of you is a map that was involved in the RFI, and following this is information that will come to you from the 3 folks that I mentioned before. And I think I'll do this the same way we did it last time and turn it over to Clay Sheets, who was with Great Lakes Capital, and let him introduce the others.
Terrific. Thank you, Chuck. My name is Clay Sheets. As Chuck said, I'm with Great Lakes Capital. First, want to tell you thank you all for taking the time. We on our side are very, very humbled and grateful for the opportunity to have been selected on this project. I also want to take a quick second and say, to have started this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, I find very heartwarming, not to get all corny, but I don't think there are too many places in this country that do that anymore. So anyway, thank you. So on this project, Great Lakes has done multiple projects with CRG, Chris Reed and his organization. I'll introduce Chris here in a second, but Great Lakes, as Chuck said, is a company. We were founded actually in South Bend in 2005, so we've got a 16-year history. I joined the company about 1.5 years ago, but have known the 2 founding principals, Brad Toothaker and Ryan Rands, for probably the better part of 12 years. And then David Arnold, who's my partner at Great Lakes, he runs our Fort Wayne office, and I am here in the Indianapolis office. I'm an Indianapolis native, been around in real estate circles here for probably half of my career. Dave and I bring about 60 years combined experience, and as you can see from the slide in front of you, this type of a public-private project and mixed-use nature is right in the strike zone for us. I don't want to walk through every one of these deals, but be happy to take any questions offline. But we really want to just at least showcase, half a dozen projects that we are doing in the Midwest that really illustrate our ability to execute a project much like the one that we have been working on with your task force team. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chris Reed to speak a little bit about CRG.
Thank you, Clay. Again, just to reiterate to this group, wow. I mean, it's as Clay said, humbled is the first word that both of us come to mind. We had pretty stiff competition in that group that Chuck had rattled off. A lot of good organizations there to be chosen. And I hope the part of the reason why we were chosen, because we were able to come up with a very creative plan and to identify with what we thought Greenwood's direction and where they would like to go. On this sheet, you see several, 6 public-private partnerships. As like Clay said, River Point on there is our most recent one that's about to wrap up in Elkhart, Indiana. And we currently are getting ready to do this exact same team with Architect. We're about 45 days from closing in Traverse City, Michigan, which is very similar units, very similar layout, right in the heart of Traverse City. Amongst, I think we have two others, Clay, that is also in the queue. We have been in business 28 years. This is I think the beginning of my 29th year. I was that guy, I lived the American dream in my garage with 2 employees, started in my garage with 2 employees, and those 2 are still here today. And we comprise today of nearly 200 employees, and we operate in about 6 states on a day-to-day basis, with our primary secondary office in the suburbs of Chicago, which we've been there for the last 13 years. As a group, we build about a little less than 1,000 units a year. And we retrofit around between 3,000 and 4,000 a year. And again, those are in states between most are east of the Mississippi River. And like I said, active in all 6 states on a day-to-day basis. Other than that, I think hopefully the team could tell you that we were very open to listening to the design, and that this will be a long-lasting project that we'll be proud of. We are 50-50 Ventures. I've said on more than one occasion, I'm investing in this myself. This is my personal money and our employees' capital, not Wall Street's money. So we believe in Greenwood. We believe in the vision, the direction, and we're excited to be part of this opportunity. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Clay, do you want to go on through these quickly for us?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Chuck. And Chris just reminded me, you know, as he outlined, this will be something like our 6th or 7th project together. The first couple CRG built, and then we partnered in a number since, and he touched on those. So yeah, not our first rodeo together with Chris and his team. In terms of the overall site plan, so big pictures you can see here, you know, we've got 357 housing units. Those units are comprised of 297 units of rental housing, which are located in buildings B, E, F, and G. As you can see, running along Madison. And then we also, so those 4 buildings represent 100% of those rental units, all 4-story with the exception of building B, which is 3-story. We've got ground floor commercial, retail, restaurant across those 4 buildings with a combined total of 18,420 square feet. Most of those are currently located intentionally on the hard corners of those buildings, because I think the last thing the city would want to see is a bunch of empty inline space. So we want to make sure, and this was even before COVID, frankly, we want to make sure we had the right mix of commercial. So we think we've got the right mix, but having said that, we actually have also been intentional. Buildings F and G, we have the ability to, on our first floor inline, and by the inline, I simply mean the space that is located interior of the hard corners, we have the ability to collapse those units and do additional commercial should the demand materialize. And then as you move further north on the site, building A is the townhomes, which currently are contemplated to be, you know, all 2- and 3-story stacked flat condos in a numbered count. We're not through our design yet, but we think in the neighborhood of 42 units. We may try and make that bigger or smaller as the market kind of dictates. That as well as a 4-story building, but the first floor is parking. So it would be stacked flats above that first floor. So 2, 3, and 4. And then moving to the east, building C and D are townhomes. Those townhomes are a 6-unit pod in building C and an 8-unit pod in building C and a 10-unit pod in building D. So combined 18 units of for sale townhomes. 100% of everything I described, plus the garage, the parking structure, which is plus or minus 355 spaces, which abuts the east end of building E. They will share that wall. 100% of everything I just described will be built in phase 1, with the exception of the condo building, building A, which is a phase 2 that we need to achieve for bank purposes and for the right thing for the asset. Make sure we've got the market pre-sale requirement, which we've agreed to, 51% pre-sale requirement before we go vertical on that. So that's, I mean, we also have 992 parking spaces, and that's kind of the project in total scope and scale. Maybe turn it over to Chris now to speak to a little bit of the renderings and architectural elements.
As you can see, all 4 stories or all street sides are masonry from ground up. And again, I had mentioned earlier that our design basis came from some of the structures on Main Street there. That was the beginning of our design thought process. So there's been a fair amount of feedback from Chuck and his team. So this is where we are as of today. Maybe not 100% the final colors, but it's meant to give you the idea of the direction we're going.
So as we get through, I think the slides that you've looked at, the last ones are really of the parking garage that are over on Meridian Street. We're looking at something there. I know Mr. Merrill and some of the other folks have maybe been around and looked at what other communities have done to try to soften the parking garages as they would front on other streets. This does not front on any single family residential piece, but it's still important, the views that we're going to be gathered from there. And this is immediately south of where the townhomes will be. And it will be the back entrance basically to go to the field house for any event or anything you might be doing there. So all of this is important. The developers have listened so far to us from a design input standpoint and a material standpoint. As Chris indicated, there's a fair amount of more work yet to do as we move through design development and final construction drawings. And they understand this is going to be a give and take process as we do that. Also included in your package was a schedule, and this is the developer's sort of best indication at this point as to where we go. Next, as was noted, about a 2.5-year construction project, with the very first piece of this getting underway is the largest building, which is in green with the blue parking garage. So this is just south of the field house. And that would start this year in the summer, if at all possible. A lot of things have to fall in place for this to work. We've got to get through final project agreement. The council has to approve the bonds. And of course, we would need your authorization this afternoon to move forward on the structure of that. The color charts will tell you what we're looking at in terms of what is happening. We're using some of the areas as construction zones or laydown areas as the other pieces get built. But the idea would be that everything other than building A, which has a pre-sale requirement, as Chris noted, basically is sort of started at once. And we are going to be leaving the site with the field house construction at the end of the summer, and basically hopefully would be turning it over to these guys. For those of you who like the construction chart in a Gantt format a little bit better, here is that. This is everybody's best guesstimate with a lot of moving parts as to what would need to occur. And this is what we are going to be using, and assuming a July 1st commencement. If any of those other elements I mentioned get pushed, this will also. So next up, Adam is going to go through the project agreement again, which has a lot of features to it, but hopefully we've got this in a summary form that will make sense to you.
Thank you, Chuck. So the first thing I wanted to start with was starting back at the visual site plan. Wanted to explain how that site is going to be really subdeveloped. So as a refresher, today the site is approximately 19 acres. There's technically 4 parcels that either are directly within those or essentially overlap those boundaries as partial parcels that ultimately would be worked into the TIF pledge agreement, and then also will become the source, the TIF increment from these parcels once developed, become the repayment source for the economic development bonds as those taxes are paid. So of the 19 total acres, about 30% is estimated to retain in the public ownership. So today, the Board of Public Works and Safety owns, through the City of Greenwood, owns the land. And in the project agreement, portions of that land, once it's subdivided and developed, portions of that will remain in the public interest as a public asset. So what this is attempting to illustrate are all of the public improvements that and public assets that will come out of this project agreement. So let's start with the outside and work in. So starting at the top of this slide, you see the green legend that's showing the Madison Avenue improvements that are slated from starting at the New Serena Way intersection, going down to the Smith Valley Road roundabout, sidewalks, and around the entire perimeter. And then on the Meridian Street side, the roadway sections and streetscapes between the new east-west road, as well as working down to the roundabout. The two dashed lines that you see are the two new contemplated east-west access roads that the developer will be required to build and then convey to the city. So those would be two new public streets, as well as the large roundabout, surface parking, field house, and field house plaza space would all stay within the city's interest as well. And then lastly, the 358 space parking garage is the developer is required to build and construct. The city would have the long-term control and ownership of that as well. Moving from more of a visual summary to more of a more detailed explanation, as you heard in the developers' bios and introductions, it's a joint venture between Great Lakes Capital and CRG. The agreement, once finalized and all the documents are approved, stipulate binding performance milestones throughout the process, both what's required and ultimately to close the project, close on the real estate, as well as maintain performance to the build quality, as well as all the conditions that were outlined for building A to go vertical as well. So with that, really the entire perspective from the city's development team has been to protect the city's interest and to minimize risk and make sure that the city's dollars are protected in this agreement. So one of the ways that is being done is two-phase or two-tranche land closing. So the developer, if they purchase all of the ground to build, would be effectively buying their portion of the acreage for $1 million, of which we contemplated two phases. So phase one are all of the buildings that you saw on the site plan, but for building A, which is on the northwest corner of the proposed site. Assuming those pre-sale requirements are met within the allotted time periods, the developer essentially secures a purchase option to be able to buy the ground under building A from the city for an additional $500,000. The developer is required then to build and construct the buildings. The public realm aspects are structured as not to exceed amounts that you'll see here to the right of the screen. And the developer is required to build 297 market rent units, over 18,000 square feet of retail and office space, and over 60 new units of for sale housing. In addition, it would be the parking garage, which in the agreement, the gross spaces estimated in the parking garage is 358 units, of which the developer would be entering in a use agreement to utilize approximately 80% of those total spaces, or 278 units, and they would be agreeing to pay their pro rata share of both the operating expenses to maintain the garage, as well as contribute annually to a capital replacement reserve to help make sure that that asset stays useful for a very long period of time. Moving to the right hand of the screen, as far as the public realm improvements, so the city would be investing in all of the public assets that would be long-lived here. So in this case, these are not to exceed amounts. You have $7.1 million in a parking garage, $3 million going to the streetscape and stormwater utility improvements along Madison and Meridian, $952,000 for the 2 new public streets that would be constructed. And then for the actual developer site improvements, this is for all of the earthwork, drainage, utilities on parcel are estimated to be about $4.3 million. And so the way this project is being funded is through the use of two various different bonds. So the first would be that what we're really discussing today is a developer purchase TIF bond or economic development bond. So essentially these parcels would be carved out of an existing parity or pledge requirement, and ultimately any incremental taxes would be used as essentially the repayment source for the amortization of that debt. And you'll see that schedule here in a moment. In addition, for the public realm, the Redevelopment Commission would need to authorize the resolution, and ultimately council would be approving central TIF revenue bonds for the public realm improvements. And then the Stormwater Utility Board has committed for some utility work along the roadways, and all of this is working backwards from the anticipated construction start of July 1st. Looking a little bit more closely here when we look at the total economics. So the total public-private partnership is estimated at $83,523,000. You can see the allocation of that funding both by looking at the project finance section as well as looking at 3 different columns to the right of the estimates. So the developer is expected to invest $68,123,000 in the site. That'll be a mix of debt and equity, and does assume all phase 1 and phase 2. The direct city financial participation into the developer parcels is estimated at $4.3 million, and the public realm improvements for the roads and streetscapes and those kind of items are estimated at $11,066,000. And then the very bottom, the other financial sources. So the economic development bonds are sometimes referred to as a dry closing. They're not a traditional bond in the sense that the city goes out and borrows money and secures funding at closing. They're really an annuity or monetization structure of tax rebates in the future. So the gross proceeds, par proceeds of that bond is estimated to be $12,869,000 that you'll see here in a minute. The amortization schedule is effectively built on that base amount. As far as local tax impact, this is something that we've been monitoring really throughout the entire project. And there's a couple points that we'd like to make, and this would be for existing either residential properties or commercial properties that are nearby. So I'd like to call your attention to the top left chart first. So this is the current captured assessed value and base assessed value in the TIF district that this property resides. So over the last few years, it's seen good growth and has continued to progress, and it's relatively new. As Chuck mentioned, this TIF district was actually established in 2013. So it's just starting to create meaningful captured assessed value. One of the things I'd like to point out is when we look at the total $83 million of investment, some of that obviously is public realm improvements. Some of that also will be the difference between developers' investment versus assessed value. But when we factor in both the assessed value from the captured piece and the base amount, what you'll see is over the remaining life of that TIF district, and therefore the bonds, we see steady growth in both. So one of the key points on this project that we're excited about that some of the others historically have not had is this project from day one is expecting about a $20 million base taxing unit improvement. So the city's public safety teams, the city library, the Greenwood School Corporation would be able to benefit and collect taxes from those new for sale residential properties from day one. When we look at the top right, you see this is actually housing data for 46142 zip code. You can see it dates back to just before this TIF was created. So looking at the residential properties, you can see they've just steadily increased over time. And the current 1 year forecast, according to Zillow's data science portal, is estimated to increase 6.9%. So with that as your backdrop, essentially general real property, either on the commercial side, industrial side, or residential side, have been increasing or expected to increase as a result of this project. We look at the tax rates. So in that opening statement that Chuck made with regards to the nominal impact, in the state of Indiana, an individual's tax bill is actually a function of the kind of certified levies of all the different budgets that essentially get passed in their overlapping units, as well as what the state allows that to grow, and then to a function, the assessed value of their property. So in a lot of respects, the assessed values have actually been increasing at a faster rate than the state allows these units of government to increase their budget. So what that means is that you actually see a decreasing tax rate that's applied for every $100 of assessed value of a homeowner's property. So in this case, the red represents, the schools, the libraries, the county, the other units of government that make up a taxpayer's bill, whereas the blue is just the municipal tax. You can see in both cases they've actually been actually decreasing slightly over the years. And we think that this project, as well as some of the economic spillover that's already starting to occur, will just continue that pattern. So lastly, just wanted to speak on the amortization schedule. So you have that in your packet. This is really just a visual of that to help summarize really what's going on. So the blue part of the chart here is actually the anticipated gross tax that would be collected from the real estate. And this would be both for all the for sale residential as well as the captured for rent commercial, retail, and office. I'd also note that this is the revenue forecast assuming a 3% growth rate, and it's only for real property. This does not include any income tax. This does not include any food and beverage tax or any other kind of utility service fees or anything like that would also be a financial impact to the area and to the city. The red line is the portion of total revenue, real estate tax revenue, that would be the captured tax increment finance portion, if you will. And then essentially it's a one-to-one match of what the anticipated annual revenue is that's been sized for your annual debt service back to, in the form of a debt service back to your bondholder, in this case, the developer. So the schedule, it does assume 3% growth in assessed values, and its starting assessed values are $47 million for the for rent, and then $20 million on the for sale product. This effectively, the red line effectively becomes the cap that ultimately would be the maximum amount of debt service that can be paid back to the developer. I'd also want to point out that any amounts paid in taxes that are less than this, essentially that sets the amount. So it floats accordingly to what the amount of actual taxes are collected, paid by the city up to these annual amounts. So the next steps gets us to today. Excuse me. So we've have made it through the redevelopment commission. The redevelopment commission has approved the project agreement in form. They approved the TIF pledge resolution as well. Today, there's a handful of documents that I know Zach from Taft is going to walk you all through. Ultimately, once your body has reviewed and hopefully made a motion to approve those documents, the next and final step for the approval process would be to go to the Greenwood Common Council and have these bonds actually reviewed and approved. There would be a public hearing for both of those as well. And then ultimately from there, once the bonds are closed on the city side, ultimately it would go to the developer to close their senior loan. We would close on the land and then ultimately start clear for the final permits to break ground and start constructing constructing the property. One thing I'd like to say here is that in both cases, both the economic development bond as well as the city TIF bond are both structured in a low risk setup. So in this case, assuming something breaks down and the project does not break ground as planned, there's a couple different protections that have been intentionally designed in this structure, and is why we're proposing them as such. So effectively, the developer bond really only becomes valuable to the developer as they start to build, have properties assessed, and start paying taxes. So essentially, even if these bonds are approved, if nothing is ever constructed, there's no value transferred. Secondly, on the more general public realm bonds, those are structured as a bond anticipation note. So while the approvals will be closed, no actual draws will be requested of that bond until the appropriate closings and developments are actually created, and those are structured to be reimbursement to the developer. So essentially, those amounts have to be invested. The city will have the right to inspect that, make sure it meets their requirements, and then ultimately be reimbursing for such expenses. With that, I'll turn it over to Chuck with kind of the closing recommendations, and then we'll open it up for Zach and Jennifer to answer any of your questions and walk you through the specific documents.
Thanks, Adam. So we're getting close to the end here. I hope we're not moving too fast, but still conveying what is very important from our perspective to get across. And we're ending with our conclusions and recommendations for you, and wanted to take some time briefly to go over that. We think that this project, as proposed by the developer and with some modifications that have been made through the negotiation period, meets the goals of the master plan, but it does account for changing market dynamics. Obviously, over the last year, there's been a lot of things that have happened that have been way different than anything else in history, and we think that if we can survive what's been going on there, this project has a great chance for success. We believe this is good for Greenwood, and part of the mayor's goal is to have something that's good for Old Town area, and certainly the existing owners and the businesses. If you made an investment recently or even long ago, your business should be better, your home should be worth more money. All of these are important. This thing does leverage the public participation. I think you can look at other projects, and I know maybe Mr. Merrill, who's a lot more familiar with other real estate transactions of a public-private nature, can tell you, in terms of the percentage of city investment, this is far less in some situations, but a lot of it has to do with the investment that I mentioned earlier in the public realm improvements that have already been made that would have been insisted on by a developer coming in to do a project like this. As Adam noted, as we've moved through the project agreement, all the significant terms are in place on this. We still need to get through final wording of the project agreement. We recognize that there are significant market risks and execution risks. And this is a fairly complex undertaking here, but there is a simple sort of overarching goal, and that is that on the public-private partnerships like this, you always run into issues as you're moving forward. But if you've got a team that is committed, and I'm talking about on the city and the developer side, you can generally get through any of those issues, and you can get the project completed in the fashion that parties would like to. Finally, then, we're recommending approval by the EDC for the bond approvals and to allow us to proceed with the Common Council. And with that, I would turn it over to Zach to briefly go through the resolution and provide the updates for you there.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, commissioners. I just want to kind of walk through resolution 2101 that's before you this afternoon for your consideration and adoption. And this resolution really does four things as it relates to the Madison project and the city's desire to issue its economic development revenue bonds. The first thing it does is make certain findings and authorizes a report. The statutory findings are set forth in the resolution, but include findings that the project will result in a diversification of industry, the creation and retention of jobs, the creation and retention of business opportunities, and will be an overall public benefit to the city. Once those findings are made, that report will be submitted to the Plan Commission for comment, and there'll be a 5-day period which comment can be had. The second thing that this resolution does is and we'll need to undertake this as soon as I kind of wrap up here, is we do need to open the floor for comment from the public that's been invited. We did publish a statutorily required notice and an opportunity for the public to participate and comment. And so the commission will need to open the floor and accept comment. The third item that this resolution does is it approves substantially final forms of the financing agreements, which includes the trust indenture, project agreement, financing agreement, and then the ordinance that will go to the Common Council for their eventual approval and allow the issuance of the bond. And finally, the fourth item that Resolution 2101 does is it makes your formal approval and recommendation to Common Council that the bonds be issued for this project. So that's kind of a summary of Resolution 2101. Be happy to answer any more specific questions. I just will note, though, that we also need to, at some point during this hearing, open the floor to the public for comment.
Understood. Thank you. All right. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate all the presentations and the explanations. And with that said, I would like to open this up for public comment. Does there anyone have anything that they would like to bring before the EDC regarding this presentation? Okay. Well, hearing none, I'm going to move on. Sorry, I muted myself. I'm going to move on to councilor comments, and I'm going to ask those on the Economic Development Commission if there are any questions that you would like to ask regarding this.
I think this bears a strong resemblance to the ironwork project up on the northeast side of town, which I think I've been up there a few times. It seems to be very successful. So I would really like to see this succeed. My own opinion is I think it's going to be a good thing for Greenwood.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, I agree with Greg. I would also just echo his comments. I think it's a great thing for the city. I would ask, it was mentioned briefly, to comment again a little bit on the mechanics of how this is low risk for the city. How does that work in terms of protecting or not obligating the city in case of a project failure? I didn't quite catch all of that.
Let me take that. Yeah, I'm happy to take a pass at that, and then anyone else that's on this team, if you want to fill in. But so what I meant by that is that these developer bonds essentially are a bond in substance, but there's not the traditional money at closing, right? So in comparison with the general city TIF bonds, that's more of your traditional debt instrument, right? The city's going to go out to the market, they're going to find money from a bank, and they're going to use that money to invest in the parking garage and those kind of things. However, with regards to the developer bonds, they're what's sometimes referred to as a dry closing, sometimes referred to as a cashless closing. They're not they're essentially a annuitization of the future tax payments that would be estimated from the project. So essentially the amortization schedule that you have effectively creates the debt service repayment opportunity, assuming that taxes are paid and collected off the development. So essentially it's assumed that the project never breaks ground. The parcels are currently assessed at zero base value. There's nothing developed. So essentially, there will be no taxes due or paid on these pledged parcels. So there will be no repayment source. The only repayment source that are pledged on these bonds are the the incremental taxes that would come from the development, the assessed value of the proposed project. Okay. So what we mean by these two bond structures, both, not just the EDC bonds, but the actual general bonds too, is that in both cases, if no project occurs, there's no developer paid taxes that will trigger the repayment pledge per the amortization schedule. And then secondly, on the more broad city TIF bonds, they're structured as a bond anticipation note. So they will be closed, but just like, I'm sure, Jennifer, I'm using kind of bad terminology here, but generally speaking, they'll essentially be an authorization to borrow, and the city could draw against that to repay the construction invoices that are occurring. So in the same scenario, if nothing is ever built, none of those reimbursements will be requested, and therefore none of those amounts will be triggered. So I hope that helps at least at a high level expand on what we meant there.
Yeah, that helped a lot. I appreciate that.
Randy, I do have one other question.
Certainly.
I guess I'll direct this to Adam. Adam, are you anticipating that there's going to be one general contractor from start to finish who's going to have ultimate responsibility for the project?
I could take that if let me. I think while in some of the other situations, the developers that we interviewed, there might have been a general contractor that would be underneath the developers. In this particular situation, we had the opportunity to basically have the developer that was involved in this, CRG Residential, Chris Reed's company, be the general contractor. And it was our surmise in all of this that with all of the various components and various buildings that were going on, having them be able to manage that internally was going to bring a far better situation in terms of oversight and management, and give the city, frankly, one group to look toward relative to issues, problems, and concerns. And so that is how this will be structured, with CRG being the general contractor in this thing. Obviously, they need to go out and put their own sub packages together for all of this. We'll be closely involved in all of that, and we will be monitoring the draws, especially for those that involve the components of the project that are going to be city owned at the end of this thing, and that the city would have title to at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't want to see this, there's a phase one, a phase two construction phases here. Really didn't want to see it split between two different contractors. And then you get into a situation, if there's a problem, of finger pointing. I think it makes sense. There's one contractor who's responsible ultimately from start to finish for the whole project.
Yeah, it's a good point, and that's what we were hoping to achieve with this as well.
That's all I have, Randy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Laura.
my only I'm excited. This is, I think this is, being a small business owner in the city of Greenwood for what'll be 10 years this September. This is exactly what the city of Greenwood needs. I just feel like it's going to be fabulous. I like the aligned incentives that it seems like we've got with the developer. The risk for the city seems low based on the explanations that we've received today. And I like the fact that we're working with teams that really have an Indiana focus and have had some really successful projects. So fully supportive of the direction and excited to see what happens. My only question is, I think on one of the slides, updates, but how frequently will we receive updates with regards to the project?
Yeah, it would be our goal to be able to send out basically monthly, just general updates on what we're doing as far as the draws and things like that are concerned, and probably quarterly updates that would be written in terms of more exhaustive information relative to narratives about where we stand with the various items. So just don't tell the developers while they're on here that they didn't get enough of the money from us. But no, that's so monthly on the cash side of it and quarterly on the project narratives. We'd like to be able to provide that to you and the redevelopment commission as well.
Great, thank you. Anything else, Laura?
Uh,
Thank you. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, just to make sure I'm not the only one absent from the record. I have seen the cities surrounding Indianapolis and Marion County that have recognized the fact that that the millennials and the Generation Z population really have put a lot of value on live, work, play, and have brought projects like this forward, have had a high degree of success with them. And I'm excited to see our community do it because I believe that it puts us in a really wonderful competitive advantage within the metropolitan area in terms of attracting talent and in terms of adding new commerce and new business growth. So I'm really excited about this project and also thankful that I live close enough I can walk over and watch the progress as it happens.
Yeah, I think it will be nice to have here as well. Now I'm going to ask the, excuse me, members of the commission. I assume you read through the financial documents and everything that were attached. Did you have any questions regarding those? Are we all pretty clear on what we're doing?
I have no questions on it.
Okay,
I'm clear.
No questions.
John?
Clear?
All right. With that, I'm going to ask if I can have a motion for resolution 2101.
So moved.
Second.
All
Second.
right. Stevie, would you please do me a favor and poll all the commission members for individual votes, please?
Sorry, I was muted.
You're
Yeah, I
fine.
can do that.
Okay. All right, Stevie's going to call your name. Please, if you're in favor, give your aye, and then we'll do a call for those opposed.
Mr. Gooden?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Spindler?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Thanks. Ms. Jacquin?
Aye.
Thank you. And Mr. Hill?
Aye.
Thanks.
Well, that makes it unanimous, so you don't really need to do a call for those opposed because we're all in favor of it. With that, resolution 2101 carries through the Economic Development Commission. Thank you all who did the presentation and explanations today. I really look forward to this getting started and us making progress. Adam, thank you for all the hard work you put into this. I know there was a lot of hours in there, so thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else from the commissioners?
I have nothing.
Have
Nope.
nothing.
All right, Mayor Myers, anything you would like to add? Or did he drop? I thought I saw him. Yep, he dropped on me. All right, again, I thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. And we will talk with everybody again soon. I'm going to call this meeting adjourned at 5:08 p.m. So thank you, everyone. Have